The day after dispersing pro-Morsi protesters in Cairo, a heavy toll and global condemnation. The defiant Muslim Brotherhood plans more marches against the crackdown. Just what are the risks of excluding the group from the political scene in Egypt? And how will the interim government deal with worldwide anger? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. Egypt is reeling from a massive security assault on supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi. Wednesday was the single bloodiest day in Egypt since the 2011 revolution, with hundreds dead. And it may be remembered as the worst incident of state violence in the country's modern history. Leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood have called it a massacre. And in a worrying sign of sectarian tension, churches across the country were attacked and in some cases torched. Now, the tragic events in Egypt have drawn condemnation from around the world. The strongest language came from Turkey's Prime Minister, who says Egypt's leaders should stand trial for what he called a massacre. The US Secretary of State John Kerry described the events as deplorable. France and Germany have summoned Egyptian ambassadors, and Ecuador has recalled its ambassador. The day's violence also had repercussions inside Egypt. Vice President Mohamed El-Baradei resigned, saying he could not be responsible for one drop of blood that could have been avoided. Well, plenty to talk about here. I'm joined now by our three guests from Cairo: Marwa Maziad, columnist for El Masri Al-Yawm and a specialist on civil-military relations in the Middle East. From London, we have Carol Kirsten, senior lecturer in the study of Islam and the Muslim world at King's College London. And here in Doha, Zakaria Abdelhadi, political analyst and professor of Islamic thought at Qatar University. Welcome, all of you. Zakaria Abdelhadi, if I could start with you. What do you think about what is going on in Egypt right now, and how bad can it get?
Okay, first of all, thank you all for being here, and I just want to first to share my condolence as every human being who can see the massacre and the Holocaust. I mean, this is not only a massacre, this is a Holocaust that's happening to the free people who are fighting for their freedom and for rights of democracy. It is quite annoying to see so much people being killed on that day, in one single day. According to governments, yesterday they said it's a couple of hundreds, 200s. Today they are saying 500. I believe the figures and numbers are much higher than this. We have over 200 people, as we've seen in other news. But
what do you base that on? You say you think the figures are higher. Why do you say that? Because
I just watched in your reputable Al Jazeera channel that there is over 250 or 60 bodies lying there in masjid near Rab al Adawiyah, and the Ministry of Health is refusing to take those bodies because those bodies will be added to the numbers, and the numbers will go up, and the number will keep going up and up and up. And this is, of course, this is a really massacre, and everybody should be clear about it. Whether you agree with those protesters or you disagree with them, this is a massacre. You cannot lie about that.
Carol Kirsten, what is your take on this?
Well, I think we're absolutely dealing with an unseen tragedy so far, and I think none of the parties involved in this stalemate we have had for the last months or so were looking for this kind of an outcome. On the other hand, it's not surprising that it came to a confrontation, because we see face to face two key actors in Egyptian politics with the greatest amount of experience in modern history. We have a military-backed government which basically has maintained the status quo for over 60 years. And on the other hand, we have an equally experienced Muslim Brotherhood who has been around for more than 80 years now, having had to deal with repressions by various regimes. And I think none of these two sides is going to back down in the near future.
Well, we'll talk more about that in a moment, but I want to turn to Marwa Maziad in Cairo and ask you about your assessment of what's happened over the last 2 days. I want to ask you as well about the state of emergency that the government has declared and the curfew now. How is that affecting day-to-day life in Egypt where you are?
Well, I should start by saying that I came from Heliopolis in about 15 minutes, which is unthinkable before. This means that people are actually committing to the curfew, or even though it didn't start yet, but people are keeping at home for things to settle down before they can feel safe again. I have to say that we reached this security solution based on the exhaustion of the political solution. If we really contextualize the events today, it's been a month and a half or more where the sit-in in Rabaa and Nahda have been taking place, and Ramadan was here, which was framed from the Muslim Brotherhood point of view as a holy war of some sort, but that passed. There were no confrontations at the time from the police forces, and Eid passed, which is the holy holiday, and it's the pressure of society on the state, where they're saying now that we delegated the state to end the political impasse, and now that we have listened to all these envoys and goodwill ambassadors from all over the international community to come and visit and negotiate with the Muslim Brotherhood, what's next? So there was a huge societal pressure on the state to take it to that level of actual security solution now that the political solutions have been exhausted. Let's not forget that the initial request or demand from those who marched on 30th of June was an early elections, which was a political vocabulary, which was a democratic option. But the mutual power snatching, and I agree with your second speaker, that kind of mutual power snatching got us where we are. But there is a lot of steps that led us here.
I want to pick up on something you said at the beginning there, Marwa Maziad, when you called this a security solution. By the most conservative estimates right now, more than 525 people have been killed, which you call a security solution. Others would call that a massacre.
The words are very subjective. I mean, I paid attention to the verbiage coming from the United States or from the European Union, and they did not use this. This is a word used in the media, of course, because it's a tragedy and there are 500 people killed. But what I mean by security
do you consider that a massacre?
Meaning that I consider this as a tragedy where 43 officers and hundreds of Morsi supporters were killed based on a security forces confrontation where they bear arms and the security forces have arms. So it's
so you're saying the protesters in Rabaa al-Adawiyya had arms. What evidence do you cite for that?
I mean that I was actually referring to the speech, the violence in the speech, like how Beltagi, which is the spokesperson from the Muslim Brotherhood, was talking about inciting the police forces to break ranks or inciting the army to let go of their uniform. I mean the violent
right, but insightful language is one thing, but actually bearing arms is something else. What evidence is there that the response from the security forces, which killed more than 500 people, was justified?
There were some evidence coming from, of course, the state, the Ministry of Interior, regarding those coffins that were, actually there was a recent march a few days ago where these were loaded with guns. There were reports on from also the Ministry of Interior about snipers on the buildings. But I'm not trying to say that I take this at face value. These are two contesting parties. But let's really face it. Here is the problem with the narrative of even two contesting parties. The state had to succeed in this event, because otherwise Egypt would completely unravel into a failed state where violence is generalized, where the Muslim Brotherhood agents that are feeling betrayed by this entire ordeal would go and torch Christian churches. So it's kind of, it would unravel at the societal level. And for here, if we recall Weber's a classic definition of the state. It has the monopoly over violence. So that was almost a struggle of wills of who can dictate the use of arms and the use of violence.
I want to put some of that then to Zakaria Abdel Hadi. Those who support this crackdown say that the security forces didn't have a choice here, and the government didn't have a choice here, that Egypt had been in a lockdown for weeks. There were reports of intimidation and threats of local residents in Nasser city, and that they were given fair warning for several days now, and they did not respond. What do you say to that?
Can I just say something that I think your guest in Cairo seems that she's just listening to and watching the Egyptian TV, and which the Egyptian TV, for amazingly, they have been doing the same exact thing that they have been doing the 25th revolution. Those are the same exact comments that was made during the 25th revolution. They were saying Muslim Brotherhood are on the street and they are the one who was attacking. They were saying churches were burned. They were saying, in fact, during the 25th revolution, those who were protecting the churches were the Islamist group. And until your guest in Egypt, if she can say no, this is what was happening. The Islamist people in the streets of Egypt, they were the one who were protecting the church, because they are part of the whole nation. So try to use the same propaganda, and this is what the coup have managed to do. The coup, in their first step, if you recall history, the coup in their first step, they shut down all media that will oppose them. All media outlets that will oppose them, they shut it down, and they kept only their own propaganda. So they can say, let me just finish.
Okay, briefly.
And they said that the people in Rabaa, they had chemical weapons, they had machine guns, they had this, they had that. So many amazing stuff they were saying. And then we didn't see any chemical weapons, we didn't see any chemical bombs, we didn't. In fact, if they had all this kind of things, why couldn't they defend themselves? We have been seeing now on the YouTube so many snipers shooting people armless, and this nobody can deny. This is a massacre, whether you like it or not. This is a massacre.
You've made that point now, but I want to ask you about the argument that was made by those who support the crackdown, that the protesters in Rabaa al-Adawiyya and in Nahda Square were given fair warning about this, and that they brought this on themselves. What do you say to that?
Okay, this is again, this is the same scenario of the 25th revolution. They are trying to steal the 25th revolution from us again. In the 25th revolution, we managed to achieve something huge, which people have the right to say their voice without fear. They have the right to demonstrate. They have the right to make rallies. And during the Morsi regime, whether we liked it or not, whether all those mistakes or not, during the Morsi regime 1 year, people were demonstrating throughout the year. Nobody was shooting at them, nobody was arresting them, and so on. People were blocking roads, people were... This kind of what your guests have said in Egypt, that this was by public demand, that people were pushing the army and the police to interfere. This is not true. This is not true. It was the media. The media were pushing and brainwashing people and asking them to do that.
Zakaria Abdel Hadi, what about some of the statements that we've heard from some of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders over the last few weeks? We heard Mohammed al-Bataghi warning that his supporters would mobilize against the government if Mohammed Morsi was not reinstated as president. A lot of people took that as insightful language and incitement of violence.
If there is somebody inciting violence, this is unacceptable, but I don't think that this was incitement. Until the last day when I saw Beltaji on your channel, when he was speaking after his daughter was sniped by a sniper, was killed, a 17-year-old girl, like my daughter, was shot there, harmless. He said, we are a peaceful demonstrators and we will continue. Those buildings around the Rabaa al-Adawiyya were all military army bases, and nobody attacked them, nobody threw stones on them, nobody did anything. And they are trying to frame. It is the same, I'm telling you, it is the same catalog of the 25th revolution. It is the same thing. They said that the Muslim Brotherhood they are trying to single the 25th revolution to one group, that it is the Muslim Brotherhood, and then after that they are trying to single them, that they are a terrorist group, they are doing this, they are killing this, they are doing this, and all this is nonsense. This is is rubbish. What is happening? And now they're saying that they're burning a police office in Al Giza, or they're burning this. This is not true. This is what exactly was happening on the 28th of January, when the Mubarak regime, people were burning the police station. They were burning things to put fear in people in what will happen to them.
Carol Kirsten, what does the future hold now for the Muslim Brotherhood? I mean, realistically, where do they go from here? Is there any chance for any sort of political reconciliation now?
Well, I think we are in uncharted territory here, and we actually have been in uncharted territory since the regime change of 2011. It is fully understandable that the Muslim Brotherhood is unwilling to back down. They can rightly claim that Mohamed Morsi became president through free and fair elections. I think nobody was contesting that in 2012, and even though maybe the international community and a large segment of even the Egyptian population did not consider Morsi their preferred choice, you have to, of course, respect the outcome of elections. The fact that now a military intervention, and I think the word coup should be used, I don't know what other word is applicable to a military intervention into the political process, the Muslim Brotherhood perceives it as that they are being robbed of their opportunity to govern the country, and they have been waiting for that more than 80 years, so that sentiments are running very high on their side is fully understandable. The problem is, of course, that Mohamed Morsi has not helped the situation by the political course he adopted, and which was watched with unease both internationally and domestically, I would imagine, where he was concentrating so much power in his hands that from the outside looking in, there was very little difference between the power of which he was holding as head of state. But the Muslim Brotherhood cannot be excluded from the political process. I think anybody would be fooling themselves if they believe they can be excluded or disqualified. You will have to deal with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Do you think the Muslim Brotherhood and the Morsi supporters should have been more accommodating, perhaps, if I could put it that way? I mean, if we go back to just before this crackdown, here we are more than 6 weeks on from the events of July 3rd when Mohamed Morsi was removed as president. It was looking to a lot of people increasingly unlikely and unrealistic that Morsi would be reinstalled as president, regardless of whether you wanted that or not. Was that a realistic position for the Muslim Brotherhood leadership to maintain at this point?
Realistic, probably not, but I don't think there is a spirit of pragmatism. But then
this goes back to what I'm saying. Doesn't that feed into the notion that they weren't willing, that they were showing what some would call a lack of political maturity here, if I can put it that way?
I don't think they are politically immature. They have more than 80 years experience in playing the game, and in the 50s, 60s, when they were on the brink of extermination by a repressive military regime, they did decide to change course and try to gain influence by civil society activities. I think at the moment, over the past year, the political scene in Egypt, which was fragmented, I think, from the moment that the Mubarak regime fell, has moved from fragmentation to polarization. And I think the intransigent position of the Muslim Brotherhood and the sort of forceful attitude of the military-backed interim government is now showing how desperate the situation in Egypt is. And I wonder if there is any chance that maybe a silent middle field is the only one that can break this stalemate. The problem there is that this middle field is completely fragmented and incapable of speaking with one voice.
Marwa Maziad, we've already seen, I want to ask you, we've already seen the results in the resignation of Mohammed al-Baradei. Could more follow him out the door in the interim government? Is there a chance that this could perhaps increase tensions between the civilian government and the military?
I want to go back to one thing that you started with, the idea of excluding a group, the Muslim Brotherhood. I think Baradei was all along trying to find a political solution, but his timing is, of course, wise to move out of this at this point. Actually, the political solution would be after this security solution has taken place. I think there has to be new criteria for integrating political Islam in Egypt. This is a great opportunity for actually learning from the Turkish experience. I happen to have extensive research experience in Turkey. There was a moment when Erbakan was told that he is trespassing constitutional borders, and his government had to resign. Now, what did his followers do? His followers started two political parties, one of which was Erdogan's Freedom, Adalet ve AK Party, the Justice and Development Party, and they won for elections. So the Muslim Brotherhood did not do what a viable political party should have survived in a political scene. The sheer description of saying Freedom and Justice Party is the political arm of the Jama'ah or the group or the Muslim Brotherhood.
Sorry to interrupt, but you talk about an inclusive democracy and getting Islamists in an inclusive democracy. You can't realistically have that while cracking down on the Muslim Brotherhood and its leadership at the same time, can you?
And the distinction, of course, between the Egyptian case, which has its own peculiarity, unfortunately, from the Turkish case, which was a development from one party to the other, is that there is a use of violence. So violence is a factor here that we had to deal with in Egypt, because the Islamists, or they never say Islamist parties, because Turkey is a secular state. When in fact Erdogan came to Egypt, he was talking about being a Muslim prime minister for secular Turkey. But the Muslim Brotherhood actually told him bye-bye, we don't want to hear that. But I'm talking about that the history of the Islam-inspired parties, the political Islam in Turkey, never had a violent element to it, whereas the Muslim Brotherhood and the Jama'at, we have in Egypt a history of a use of violence or a threat of violence, and that complicates the issue very much. So if we are to move forward towards the inclusion of political Islam or Islam-inspired parties, the discussion has to be from the values that motivate economic policies, foreign policies, political laws of some sort, but not the formulation that the Muslim Brotherhood have had. And I think they pressured President Morsi so much that they became the liability on him as president.
All right, just in the couple of minutes or so that we got left, I want to turn to Zakaria Abdelhadi on this, and I want to ask you about, you had mentioned earlier about the fact that many Muslims and Muslim Brotherhood supporters had protected churches in some of these areas, but the response from many supporters has been to attack and burn down churches and attack the Christian community. There have been numerous reports of that on Wednesday, more than a dozen at least. How do you expect people to have sympathy then for the Muslim Brotherhood if this is how some of them react?
Because what I'm trying to say, this is the same tactics of the 25th revolution, the same tactics that happened, that the government, and we have already discovered that when there was a burning in Alexandria, the Kanista Qaddisain, it was blotted and burned by the military, by the security officers. Okay, so this is the same tactics that they are using now. What we are hearing is one side story from the media from the government, who is a coup government, who is not legitimate government, who came and stole people hope, who stole people choice, and now they are trying to force us. And then another very important aspect that we have to be understanding. Just a minute, just a very important aspect.
Because we are out of time now.
This is not the issue of the Muslim Brotherhood or not. This is the issue of the democracy of Egypt. The issue of the 25th revolution is going to be robbed from us, and it's not the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is a small, tiny faction within this democracy.
And on
but
that,
it is everybody who is fighting for democracy.
On that, we are going to have to leave it. Thank you to all of my guests, Marwa Maziad, Karul Kirsten and Zakaria Abdelhadi. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Remember, if you want to send us your feedback, just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. And if you're on Twitter, you can tweet me at Hazem Seeker. Join us again when I'll be back in this chair 24 hours from now. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.